You ever get that feeling of déjà vu, but it's so strong it feels, well, it feels like a real memory? We hear these stories all the time. People under hypnosis who can recall these incredible details from a life that just wasn't theirs. Well, today we're diving into a really wild theory. One that suggests these experiences don't come from some reincarnated soul, but from something literally written into our DNA. Could the memories of our ancestors actually be hiding inside our genes? Let's find out.
Just let that sink in for a second. What if the deepest, most ancient echo in your mind wasn't from your childhood? What if it was passed down from an ancestor you never even met? That is the mind-bending question at the very heart of what we're talking about today.
Right, so we've all seen this in movies, right? Past life regression. This idea that through something like hypnosis, people can tap into memories from previous lives. And this concept, it's pretty much always tied to spiritual beliefs, especially the idea of reincarnation.
And this is where things get really interesting, because it sets up two totally different ways of looking at this. On one side, you've got the spiritual view, an immortal soul that hops from body to body, collecting experiences. But the theory we're digging into today, it offers a biological alternative, that these memories are actually echoes from our genetic line, encoded right there in our cells. So here's how we're going to break this all down. First, we'll touch on the basic idea. Then we're going to get into the hard science that actually gives this theory a leg to stand on. From there, we'll tackle the million-dollar question: how could a memory even fit inside a molecule? And finally, we'll zoom out and ask what this all could mean for who we are. Okay, so let's make that shift. We're stepping away from the metaphysical, and we're stepping right into the molecular. The author of this theory basically asks us to just put the idea of a soul on the shelf for a minute and entertain a purely scientific what if. And this, right here, is the central question. The argument is that even if you don't buy into reincarnation, the phenomenon of these bizarre, vivid recollections might still be real. And if they are, could there be a biological reason for them? The author is betting the answer is tangled up in that double helix.
Now, to really wrap our heads around this wild idea, we've got to do a quick dive into how our DNA actually works, because this entire theory hangs on one incredible, totally proven fact about how our genetic code makes a perfect but partial copy of its own past every single time a cell divides.
The key phrase here is semi-conservative replication. I know it sounds super complicated, but the idea behind it is actually beautiful. Just picture a zipper. When DNA copies itself, it just unzips right down the middle. And then each half builds itself a new partner. So every new DNA molecule, it's half old, half new. But how on earth do we know this is true? Well, back in 1958, two scientists came up with this brilliant experiment. They basically made some DNA heavy by tagging it. Then they let it copy itself in a light environment. The big question was, what would the new DNA weigh? Would it be heavy, light, or something in between? And the results were just undeniable. They didn't find separate heavy DNA and light DNA. Nope. They found only one kind, a perfect mix, a hybrid of the two. This was the smoking gun. It proved, without a doubt, that every new strand of DNA is half old and half new. So this is the big takeaway, the crucial point. A piece of the past is physically saved and carried forward into the future in every single one of your cells. A strand from the parent molecule lives on. And this isn't a theory, this is undisputed scientific fact. And it's the launchpad for this whole idea. Okay, so we've established a scientific fact. A piece of our genetic past is literally carried inside us. But how do you get from a physical strand of molecules to a full-blown memory? That's the huge speculative leap we're about to take.
And this is the big jump, isn't it? It's one thing to say DNA carries the blueprint for your eye color. It is a whole other thing to suggest it could carry a cognitive blueprint, an actual memory of a sound or a sight or a feeling. How could that possibly work?
Well, here's the proposal. It's as bold as it is simple. The idea is that the old strand of DNA, the one from your ancestor, doesn't just carry physical traits. It could, hypothetically, carry information that codes for actual memories. And then, as an embryo develops, this ancient information could get re-implanted into the brain as it's being built.
All right, let's follow this thread. If these memories are being passed down, they've got to be stored somewhere, right? This can't just be about molecules. It has to connect to the brain. The theory needs a plausible filing cabinet in our heads for this ancient archive to live.
And to find that spot, we have to look at how our brains evolved over millions of years. The oldest, most basic part is the archicortex. It handles pure instinct.
Then came the paleocortex, and finally, the neocortex evolved. That's the big part we use for conscious thought and learning. But that archicortex, that's the original foundation.
So the author then takes these ancient brain layers and maps them onto our modern minds. Our conscious thoughts, they live up in the new neocortex. Just below that is our preconscious, stuff we can remember if we try. But way down deep in that ancient archicortex, that's where the true unconscious lives. And here it is, the final piece of the puzzle. The theory suggests that the archicortex, the part of our brain that deals with instincts, things we're just born knowing how to do, is the perfect storage unit. It's programmed purely by genetics, not by our life experiences. So what if that programming included fragments of an ancestor's experiences? So, let's bring this all home. What does this mean for us, for you? If there's even a tiny grain of truth to this theory, it could completely change how we see ourselves, our families, and our place in the long, unbroken chain of history.
So, to sum it all up, we know for a fact that DNA's copying process saves a physical link to our ancestors. This theory then speculates that this link could carry bits and pieces of their memories. These memory fragments get filed away in the most ancient, instinctual part of our brain, and they only bubble up when our conscious mind lets its guard down, like in dreams or hypnosis.
And this isn't just some new age fantasy. Over 100 years ago, scientists were already talking about our immortal genetic line. This theory just takes it one step further and asks, what if that immortal line carries more than just blueprints for our bodies? What if it carries story?
Now, let's be super clear here. I really want to stress this point. What we've been exploring is a speculative theory from the source material. It is a thought experiment. It has not been proven. We're presenting it here not as scientific law, but as a powerful idea meant to make us think a little differently about memory, biology, and who we are.
Which leaves us with one final, massive question that echoes back through all those generations. If we carry the memories of our ancestors within us, then who are we, really? Are we just individuals, or are we history itself, made flesh and blood?